Hey everyone, Dockwell here, and welcome to another one of my Dota 2 hero guides. Today we're going to be taking a look at Disruptor. So Disruptor is a support hero, pretty much only played as a 5 position actually. He can play 4 position, but this is one of those unique heroes that doesn't really scale all that well with items. He pretty much just buys the normal support items, Force, Glimmer, all of that kind of stuff. He can buy an Agnum Scepter, which will actually make him really, really good, but that's basically the only item that allows him to scale other than what he just does naturally. And that's why this hero can be really, really good from the 5 position, because his abilities are just super OP, super good, especially outside of the laning stage. Once you hit 6, once you have some points in all of your skills, you are such a beast, especially in team fights or even pickoffs or anything like that. But how do we think about Disruptor in general? Well, he's kind of your average 5 position. He just, has okay damage. He can harass a little bit. He's a ranged hero. He's not that fast, not that slow. He's pretty squishy. He's just your average 5 position. He just does what he can to harass as much as possible without dying and then, get off the pulls and all those kinds of things. Just your typical 5 position. But then once you get level 6 and you kind of get into that, early, mid to late game, anything after the laning stage, you are such a powerhouse of a hero because you can kind of affect every aspect of the game. The only thing you really don't do is push waves, or push towers, basically. Like, really, you don't do a lot of tower damage. You can even push waves a little bit, but just not a lot. It's not crazy good, but you can help out with ganks because you have an ability that is kind of like X marks the spot that brings people back to where they were a few seconds ago. You have an insane team fight ultimate and another team fight ability that is like a control spell in an area, a silence and a magic damage area of effect spell, a vision spell. You have everything that a support would need, and your abilities scale so well into the late game that you can kind of assist in every single aspect of the mid to late game, which is really, really good. Now, the counter to this hero is the same thing as most support heroes. The counter is basically jumping him in the fight and killing him early on before he gets all his spells off, or forcing him to use his spells in a way that's not very effective, which that's pretty easy to do because he is a squishy hero, so having good positioning on this hero is extremely, extremely important. And then the other thing that counters this hero is BKB. Basically, all of his spells just are negated by BKB, but that's what I was saying earlier, where he can buy an Agnum Scepter to kind of, reverse counter that, because Ags helps his ult basically disable BKB. So it's kind of one of these things that this hero is countered mostly by BKB, but later on in the game, if it gets to 40 whatever minutes, and he's able to get some farm, he can actually kind of reverse that counter. But really, this hero is just typical, a great 5 position, great all around. I think it's great for new players as well, but it also isn't just mindless. There's actually some execution with team fighting, and you can get off these big team fight ultimates that really crush enemy teams. So that's how to think about Disruptor. Now let's take a look at his abilities and see how they work. So now that we understand Disruptor in general, let's take a look at his abilities and see how they work. So first, we're going to look at Thunderstrike, this Q ability. It's pretty simple. You cast it on an enemy, and every so often, after a certain delay, they take a tick of damage. So you see there's a little debuff over them, there's a tick in an AoE, and basically they just take damage. But they also get slowed. It's a little bit, there's a little bit of a debuff that's applied to them that is actually pretty good. So we see Axe is running away. He gets slowed every time that the debuff goes off. So this is really, really good. It actually helps you get those extra right clicks in lane. And this is basically your harassing tool in lane. So this is really good. You can spam it. You see the mana cost is decent, and it scales up, but basically you just cast it on the enemy. You can get a bunch of right clicks in as they try to run away. It's super, super annoying, but also keep in mind there is an AoE. So every time you see, there's a little AoE every time the Thunderstrike goes off, so that will damage anything actually in the AoE. So you see I cast it on this creep, but it also damages the creep right next to it. So this is an ability that you can use to clear waves, to push out waves. You just cast it on a creep wave. You can even just cast it really quick and then run away to make sure that the creep wave pushes. So he does have a little bit of pushing capability. He just doesn't do a lot of tower damage, but this is a pretty versatile spell. Now, the one last thing to keep in mind about this is it also grants vision. So it's kind of hard to see right here or demonstrate for you, but basically if the Axe goes out of vision, like right here, he should be out of vision. Actually, there are creeps around. It is daytime, so it's kind of hard to tell. So there's a place where Axe can go out of vision. So let's go here. Let's cast this on Axe and then have him run out of vision, if we can even get there in time. Yeah, so there you see Axe was in vision, now he's out of vision. And and there you go. And there's like lasting vision. So it's a little bit hard to demonstrate just because I was controlling both of them. But basically, yeah, this gives you vision, and that's very, very important because obviously vision is extremely important on heroes, you know, just to like know where they are, know what they're doing, all those kinds of things. It's hard to juke and escape when you have Thunderstrike on you, all of that kind of stuff. But I'll also show you how that synergizes with his other spells here in a second. So basically, Thunderstrike synergizes really, really well with Glimpse. So Glimpse is a pretty, you know, easy ability to understand. Basically, it's like time lapse or X marks the spot where you cast it and the enemy basically goes back to where they were a few seconds ago. So let's say Axe is standing here. Let's say he's farming creeps, doing whatever, and then he decides to run away because he sees people coming or something, and I'm like, oh, I gotta chase him. I can cast Glimpse, and after a short delay, he comes right back to where he was. So you can see how that's obviously really, really effective for ganking. In team fights, you know, after a team fight's over, people are running away, you chase them down, you use Glimpse, they go right back to where they were. But it is something that you need to make sure you're using it correctly, because I do see some people that just start out using Disruptor or playing Disruptor, and you can use this to kind of grief your team in some ways. So make sure you're using it effectively and correctly. You're not just like spamming it randomly or using it randomly. Try to use it effectively and really think about how you're using it. But basically, this will pair up with Thunderstrike in a really interesting and obvious way, is that, you know, the Axe is running away, but let's say I don't have vision here. Well, it doesn't matter because I have the Thunderstrike on him. So even if he runs out of vision, he runs into the trees, he runs up a cliff, whatever it is, if I have Thunderstrike on him, I will still be able to cast Glimpse. And you see Glimpse has an insanely long range. So especially if you buy Aether Lens even on this hero, which is a possibility, you can glimpse people back from super, super far away. And so that's why you really want to make sure you're casting Thunderstrike on someone, they try to run away, then you glimpse them back, and then they are, you know, back in that position, and then you can kill them. The next spell that he has is Kinetic Field. So Kinetic Field is very interesting. It's just an AoE like field that goes up after a short delay, and then enemies aren't able to actually run out of it. So this is a very, very good team fight control spell. It's also good in the laning stage at pretty much any time in the game to prevent people from running away. But keep in mind that when you cast it, there is a short delay before it actually goes up. So you see, I casted it there, and Axe was still able to run through it because it didn't like fully activate yet before he was able to get through. The other thing is, keep in mind that it's also one of the same kind of things as people can't go into it in the same way that they can't get out of it. So that's Kinetic Field. Pretty good spell, and it also links up with the other three spells in the sense that, you know, you can cast Thunderstrike on somebody, then you can glimpse them back, and then wherever they were, you can cast the Kinetic Field around them. So actually, let's do this here. Let's demonstrate how to do this a little bit better. So Axe is here. We're going to have him stay here for a while. We're going to send him in this direction. We're going to cast Thunderstrike on him, and then we're going to glimpse him back and put a Kinetic Field right there, and then by the time he's back, he can't move out of the Kinetic Field because it's already activated. So that's how you basically combo all three of these spells. And you see how they can all link up and be really, really good at ganking people, at controlling people, at locking people down in fights. Now, the other thing, and the last thing to know, is that he has a really, really good AoE ultimate called Static Storm. So you see the AoE is pretty big there. You just stick it down. It does a ton of magic damage and silences everything in the AoE. So it should be pretty obvious by now how you combo all of these four spells together. Basically, you cast Thunderstrike, the Axe will run away, you glimpse back, press that, and then there, you press all your spells, and there we go. He was unable to run away. You did a ton of damage with Thunderstrike, you did a ton of damage with Static Storm, you silenced him, and you were controlling him, you were not allowing him to run away either. So the only real solution for that is if he buys BKB. And as soon as you glimpse him, or as soon as you pop your ult in Kinetic Field, he has to pop BKB in order to survive. So that's a pretty good demonstration of how to combo all of this hero's spells, but you can also use them in other ways where, you cast Kinetic Field on a stun target, you can cast Static Storm and then Kinetic Field if you have someone that's stunned, but you need to make sure they don't cast an ability. All of those kinds of things. There's kind of different ways you can combo these together, but that's the basic way that you're going to combo all of these spells. Now keep in mind that Kinetic Field is a very interesting ability in that it stops like Slark, Pounce, and other things like this. It's a very, very good counter to some mobility heroes that have maybe not blinks, but other things like Pounce and stuff like that, so keep that in mind. But that's pretty much Disruptor. That's how he works, but I will add one last thing. I will show you what the Agnum Scepter does. Now, this is the one thing that makes this hero like better even into the late game. So let's even give Axe a BKB here, and I'll show you what happens. So usually you know, you cast this, and the axe just BKBs and he's allowed to run through it and things like that, right? Well, with Agnum's Scepter, this is not the case. Agnum's Scepter actually mutes items as well. So that means that you cast this on people, and see, I'm selecting axe, I'm pressing the BKB button. It simply does not work. And now it finally does once the spell is done. So we take Ags off. We'll wait for this BKB to wear off here, and I'll show you how how without Ags I can cast this. Now I'm the axe. I can press BKB within the ultimate there, and it doesn't do anything. So I think that's a good demonstration of what the Ags does and how it can be so powerful. But this is kind of the one thing that this hero buys that makes him even better into the late game. It can really honestly win you games when people are expecting to pop their ult or to pop their BKB in your ult, and they're just not able to do it, and they're just locked down, controlled, and there's nothing they can do. So that is Disruptor. Those are his abilities. Now let's jump into a game and see how he's played. So now we're jumping into a replay here of Dubu playing Disruptor, and it is a little bit of a weird lane because obviously there's a Tinker for carry, which is a little bit odd, but it kind of doesn't really matter because the same thing applies kind of regardless of whether or not you have a Tinker as your carry or you have a normal carry. You kind of just play the same way. You level your Thunderstrike, you use it to harass, and you see that throughout this lane, even though he is using his Thunderstrike, and he uses it to harass, it's actually pretty bad in this game just because the Legion is able to use that Purge to dispel the Thunderstrike. So keep that in mind with Thunderstrike. It's something I didn't mention. It is dispellable because it's just kind of a basic spell that, you know, if there's something like a Slark Q or even like a Tide passive or something like that, or the Legion Commander press the attack, it will purge off that Thunderstrike. But you see, this is how good it is, though. He can harass down this Mirana with this because the Legion either doesn't have the mana, doesn't want to use it, or the spell's on cooldown, or whatever it is. He can just use this a ton to harass, and basically, whenever someone has Thunderstrike on them, you can easily win the right-click battle trade with them. So you see, that's pretty much what you want to do. Either use that on the 4 position or on the off-lane hero, whatever it is that works out in your lane, but you just basically want to be using your mana to spam out Thunderstrike as much as possible because that is how you basically harass and win the lane. Now, the other things that he does are just your typical, like, 5-position stuff. We can speed it up here. You also notice that he does buy a bunch of mangoes so that he can keep spamming his spells, but otherwise he's just harassing. He's doing what he can to, you know, secure the lane as much as possible with for his Tinker here. But we'll eventually see that he does go to try to D-ward, to pull all of the typical 5-position stuff. The one thing I will say, though, is because Dubu is such a good player, he is holding his skill point. We see him de-warding here as he knows that the small camp is warded up. But you see him holding his skill point just because he wants to hold it just in case maybe he can get a kill with Glimpse or maybe he can get a kill with Kinetic Field, whichever one will be better for a certain scenario. You see he's just holding it. Once he hits 3, he puts 2 in Thunderstrike because he's going to do that anyway. So that's just kind of like a high-level thing. I wouldn't say you have to do that all the time, but just keep that in mind. That's something that you definitely can do in the laning stage. But I would just typically follow the build. You see he buys a bunch of regen so that he can spam out of spells, keep present in the lane, because Disruptor is kind of squishy, so you're going to be trading right clicks and harass with your Q, so you do want to buy a bunch of, you know, salves and things like that. Then we see typical 5-position stuff. He's going here to stack and pull, and this is just the perfect way to play the laning stage. But that's pretty simple. He's also looking mid to see if he can help. This is just how you play 5-position. Pretty simple, pretty straightforward on a hero like Disruptor. Now, we skipped ahead a little bit here, up to like the 7-minute mark, and I just wanted to show you this because this is important for this hero. Now, I didn't really mention it in the abilities section, but this hero's Kinetic Field gives a little bit of vision in the AoE. So you see he uses it there to try to trap the Legion, but you see how it gave a little bit of vision, so you could see the Legion kind of running around, but it didn't give vision all the way through all of the trees to the outside of the trees, so keep that in mind. So you can use this ability to de-ward. You can like get vision on cliffs and things like that to de-ward, all that kind of stuff. You can get vision in the trees like we just saw there, but keep in mind the vision isn't just like the full Kinetic Field. It is a little bit worse, a little bit smaller AoE than that, so you're not going to be able to see everything in there. So that is important. That's an important part of the Kinetic Field. But the other thing that I want to show you is this next play right here. So the Legion dies. He knows that the Legion is dead. The Legion TPs in. They haunt. And you see, watch this. He uses Glimpse, and Legion goes all the way back to base. This is an extremely important part of Disruptor. Basically, because this ability sends people back to where they were a few seconds ago, it says 4 seconds, when you know that somebody is TPing in, whether you see them TPing in right in front of you, or you see, they were on the other side of the map, the only way they could get to where they are right now is by TPing, which is what just happened there. You can glimpse them, and then it sends them all the way back to base. So they wasted 100 gold for their TP, and now they have to walk back in. They're not part of the gank. They're at the other side of the map or back in base, wherever they are. It just really, really ruins the enemy's ganks and all those kinds of things. So you can see how Disruptor can be such a, force to be reckoned with when you're pushing a tower, when you're ganking, things like that. So just keep that in mind, that that's a really, really good part of Disruptors, using glimpse to ruin people's TPs when they're trying to defend or gank or all those kinds of things. So, yeah, that's a few extra quirks, a few extra things to understand about Disruptor spells once you use them, in the early to mid game. Now, the next thing I want to show you is basically how to use Disruptor's ultimate and his kinetic field to get kills in the early game. So once you hit 6, it's really important that you use this ability off of cooldown as much as possible to secure kills. You see there, he pops the kinetic field first, and then he instantly uses his ultimate so that the Legion can't get any spells off and is trapped in the AoE. But what you really want to make sure of, and we'll rewind back here so you see it again, what you want to make sure of is that you're casting the kinetic field in such a way that it's impossible for the enemy to run out by the time it activates. So you see he casts it basically right on top of the Legion, so that it doesn't really matter where the Legion runs, he cannot get out of that AoE ability. So you kind of want to click the kinetic field right on top of the hero, or even maybe a little bit ahead of the hero if they're running away, those kinds of things. And then you pop your Static Storm immediately after. So that's a perfect example of how to use those two spells in combination to get kills, and I think that's something you should be doing basically once you hit 6 for kind of the rest of the game, until it gets a little bit later when you sometimes should save your ult for those big team fights. Now, the next thing I want to show you, which you only skipped ahead a little bit, like a minute here, is how to use the glimpse offensively after the team fight is over to secure another kill. So we see here, he's chasing after the Legion Commander to get vision, because he knows if he can get the duel off, they are certainly going to get the kill on this Legion. That's the perfect way to use glimpse to pick people off, whether it's ganking or whether it's in team fights after everybody's running away. You kind of want to chase people down, because glimpse has such a good range that you can get people back, into a position that they don't want to be in, and then you can secure that kill. So that's a perfect example of how to use glimpse after, into the early to mid game to secure kills after team fights are over. And now, briefly, before we're done this clip, that's a perfect example of also how to feed. Now, the next thing I want to show you is kind of how to use Disruptor later in the game to kind of bait out BKBs so that your team can kill them without having to worry about their BKBs. So in this game, it's a very interesting, unique game in that they have a Tinker and a Leshrac who want to do like mostly magic damage. So really, it's very, very important that the enemies don't have BKBs. So you see here, he uses his full combo on the Kunkka and basically forces out the Kunkka's BKB in a way that the Kunkka doesn't necessarily want to, use the BKB, because the Kunkka is using the BKB for mainly just to like survive and get back into the fight. But now that the BKB is down, Legion also used duel and BKB, it's basically they're completely screwed here, where they can't really do anything to all this magic burst damage from the Leshrac and from the Tinker. And that's just the perfect example of how to use your abilities in a way that you don't want to just be waiting for that like huge AoE team fight where you get like 3 people in the kinetic field with the silence, especially because later in the game, once it hits 30 minutes, people are going to be having BKBs. The enemy's going to have BKB if they're intelligent, if they're smart, if they know what they're doing. So really, if the enemy has BKB and you know that, your job isn't necessarily to, kill people with your combo like it was maybe earlier in the game, but your job now is to almost like force BKB when the enemy doesn't want to pop BKB because it's not very effective for them to go in and kill the important heroes. They're going to have to pop BKB just for your spells, and then they're not going to be able to have it later on in the fight when they need it to survive or to do damage to the cores. And so that's kind of key to playing Disruptor in that like mid-later portion of the game, where like mid to late game where you don't have Ags yet, people have BKB and they just countered your ult, and it's really hard to know when to use it. That's like I think a key fight and a key way to use your abilities effectively when it feels like they kind of became ineffective. So that actually is my Disruptor guide. I think I pretty much showed you a good example of every single way to use Disruptor in the team fights, how to get pickoffs, how to use your glimpse effectively to gank and other things like that, how to, you know, get vision with your Q, all of these kinds of things, use kinetic field, all of that kind of stuff. And we also see, if you watched this replay, like you could download it yourself, watch a replay like this, you'll see how aggressive he is usually in the fights, even though he is a ranged hero, because he wants to be able to get those glimpses off on the enemy and things like that, to get them out of position to get kills and stuff like that. So that's my Disruptor guide. I hope it helps everybody out. As always, like, comment, subscribe, all of those kinds of things. The links are below in the description for my Discord, for my Patreon for coaching, and for my Twitch channel where I'll be doing my replay reviews from now on. So as always, guys, thanks a lot for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.